So first and foremost, I think that we objectively have the best worship, without question. I'll fight people to the death over that. I say this as somebody who loved the Eastern Orthodox liturgy. The liturgy of St. John Chrysostom was beautiful to me, but I think that objectively, the 1928 prayer book, especially with the American Missal editions and all that, is beautiful. It's unparalleled. Actually, honestly, yeah, the 1662 is beautiful also. I would love to actually revive the 1549.
Father James Gadd, welcome to the podcast. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Father James and I run, well, first of all, my first love is St. Francis Anglican Church and the people here. So I'm the rector at St. Francis. Second thing I do, which more people know me through, is the Barely Protestant YouTube channel. And on the channel, we talk about Anglicanism, defenses against Roman Catholic arguments against us, or Eastern Orthodox ones, or Baptist ones, etc. And talking about sort of just general things that are happening in the world today, especially as it relates to the church.
Well, very cool. I'm grateful to have you on today. I wanted to talk with you because I realize we've been in contact for a while now and we know each other, but I've never really heard your story from start to finish regarding how you became an Anglican and ended up pursuing the priesthood and ending up where you are today. And so we can start wherever you would like to, but I'd love to just hear your story.
Well, I grew up Baptist, independent fundamental Baptist, and that the reality of that is sort of, well, I got the pipe here just to show how far I have fallen, But so I grew up independent, King James only, fundamentalist Baptist, and we were, if you know that world, we were probably in between, a little more fundamentalist than Pensacola Christian College, but not as fundamentalist as Hyles Anderson. So those who know what that means. Anyway, we very anti-liturgical, or so we thought, and very anti anything that was not Baptist. I ended up through college discovering various other traditions, and I did so. There's a long story to this, but essentially, what I did was I met someone who became a close friend of mine. His name is Stefan, and he and I did what we called church clubbing, which is we went to a different denomination every single Sunday, sometimes, very often, multiple denominations. We would rush from one service to another. We'd go to the early of one and, the later of another and all that sort of stuff. We've been to just about every major denomination you can think of. If you if you say the name, and it's a decently well-known name of a denomination, we've been to it. And that's how I discovered liturgy. That's how I discovered the sacraments. And it was mostly actually through the Eastern Orthodox. And I fell in love with the liturgy of Eastern Orthodoxy and their view of the sacraments. At the same time, I was having issues with some of their theology, quite a few different things, but the big one for me, or one of the big ones for me, was the sort of extreme exclusivity that I saw within Eastern Orthodoxy. No salvation outside the church. Now, on the face of it, I agree with that statement. No salvation outside the church. There is no salvation outside the church. However, the way it was interpreted by them is no salvation outside of their particular recognized jurisdictions. And I couldn't find a biblical or honestly even a patristic justification for their definition of the church that way. So that and a few other issues I had caused me to seriously rethink the Eastern Orthodox. I was always a bit resistant anyway, because I never like to just dive into something. And so I would go mostly for Vespers, and I would have conversations with them and continue to have friends with them to this day. In fact, I have a group chat with a few Eastern Orthodox friends, and I just texted them today. We've got inside jokes that we do all the time and stuff. Anyway, so yeah, I was sort of, after that took about a year or so, I realized Eastern Orthodoxy is not for me, but I was like, I can't go back to my Baptist church anymore. So I was looking into other things. Roman Catholicism, the local Roman Church, was very, very Novus Ordo, and I'd already had sort of major theological issues with what they taught, especially concerning the papacy, and the lack of beauty in the liturgy just was just like
Mm.
icing on the cake or whatever. So I'd been to an Episcopal church, of course, and that, like, it was beautiful, the liturgy, more beautiful, honestly, than the Roman church, the local Roman church.
Mm.
But at
I
the same
believe it.
time,
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, but at the same time, I was just like, no, I can't do this. I know what they hold to. It's way too theologically compromised. And so I was settling with some sort of like Church of the Nazarene or Methodist or whatever. And then I found a local ACNA parish, actually through my professor, who himself, he was a priest within the Anglican tradition. So I checked it out. It's called St. Patrick's Anglican Church, and I fell in love with it, and I have not turned away from the Anglican tradition since then. And that's the sort of, 3, 4 paragraph version of the story.
Yeah. Well, let's break it down just a little bit because I imagine myself having gone from a non-denominational kind of upbringing, which was more in the fundamentalist camp, I would say, into the Anglican tradition. There's a lot of, shall we say, sacred cows that needed to die in order to make that transition, and there were some that were relatively easy. It made sense historically, but there were others that took a little while for me to really get my mind around, and there was some trepidation. Did you experience anything like that?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So the first one, and this is actually when I was talking with my Roman Catholic friends, was the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. I, as a Baptist, was disgusted by the concept of the real presence of Christ and argued vehemently against it. And I would go to the Roman Catholic College group, and we'd have debates and discussions about these sorts of things. And what's very providential is that I would then go to the RUF, Reformed University Fellowship, I think it's what it stands for. And they were talking about John 6. So in the Roman Catholic college group, they were talking about John 6, talking about the real presence. And then in the Reformed, the RUF, they started talking about John 6 for, their understanding of predestination, election, God's sovereignty, etc. And I remember talking to the RUF people and saying, guys, just so you know, I find the arguments from the Roman Catholics about their position of real presence more convincing concerning John 6 than I find your arguments on John 6 about election and such. And so it was an interesting sort of debate. I kept finding the liturgical sacramental arguments for based on scripture to be more convincing, and the linchpin for me was when my Roman Catholic friends brought up Saint Ignatius of Antioch, and so I'm reading his words in what is it, Epistle to the Ephesians, I think, or Smyrnians, and here I am where I'm looking at a guy who dies in AD 107. And here he is talking about how the heretics are the ones who deny the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And I'm like, I don't want to be a heretic. So I went to, at the time, one of my favorite apologists. I'd recently discovered him, James White, to see if he had any arguments against St. Ignatius. And he happened to have like a 6-part video series on it. And so I listened to his arguments, and I found there was nothing of substance there to argue against what Saint Ignatius. All he had was basically like, it's not transubstantiation. Well, like, oh yeah, I already know it's not necessarily at least transubstantiation, but it just that was sort of the linchpin when Dr. James White had that video series. It's probably still up on YouTube, honestly. I was just thoroughly unconvinced. I'm like, okay, that like, if he can't even mount a good argument against this, then I guess I'm gonna probably accept it. So I eventually accepted the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. Baptism or regeneration was easier, and the hardest one actually for me was infant baptism.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I believe it. that was the first thing for me in my thinking that changed, but I do think it was the one that took me the longest to um, come to terms with. Especially, I mean, what as a Baptist, you have to you have to change your entire framework around what salvation is, how it's brought to you. Um, from kind of this static moment where you say a prayer and then you're
Yeah.
saved to
Yeah.
kind of this reality of a saved being
Living in
saved will be
salvation.
saved. It's yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lived reality. And so yeah, it's really a worldview change. How was it in regards to like family and friends and people that you kind of had to in some sense say, hey, I'm not where you are theologically anymore.
No one really gave a really interesting response to it, except for my mother. Um, my dad didn't care. He's like, as long as you love Jesus, that's fine, kind of thing.
Hmm.
My older sister and younger sister didn't seem to really care much. My brother was still Baptist at the time, so he didn't care. Um, he is Roman Catholic now, but
Okay.
my mother, her first question was, "Well, wait a minute, do you guys follow Jesus, or you? What is this? What's Anglicanism?" I go, Mom, we actually worship Muhammad, and she freaked out. She screamed. I said, No, Mom, no, it's okay. And then when I told her that the Anglicans gave us the King James version of the Bible, she was a lot happier about that. So that made it a lot better for her.
Yeah. That's funny. That's funny. What was it like coming into Anglicanism? Because I think a lot of people approach liturgical traditions with rose-colored glasses, where whatever world they're coming from that they're starting to disassociate with, the beauty of the liturgy and the tradition is just, oh my goodness, this is better than anything on earth. And then you get in and you realize, just like everywhere else, there are problems that exist
Oh yeah,
within Anglicanism, within Roman Catholicism, within Orthodoxy, everywhere. You can't escape it. And
oh
so,
yeah.
what was it like for you becoming an Anglican and then going, oh, wow, there's a lot of stuff here that's still being worked through.
So I'd already known about the sort of split between Tech and the ACNA. My parish was in the ACNA, but interestingly enough, it was basically an American Missal sort of church. So essentially the 1928 with some Missal additions, which
Yeah,
is the American Missal. But
right, right.
for people who don't know what the American Missal is,
Yes, yes.
so I was thankfully sort of mostly oblivious to the sort of Anglican fights even within the ACNA. I don't think I knew right away that there were groups within and entire dioceses within the ACNA that were for quote women's ordination. Uh, that I think I found out maybe a few years later. Not that it was being hidden from me or anything per se, but like it just I didn't know about it. I knew my parish was against it, and I knew at least to the priesthood, the diocese I was in was against it. I don't think I knew about the diaconate part. But
Okay.
anyway, it was really more when I went into seminary and I started visiting very, very, very evangelical in the not so positive sense, low church Anglican parishes, and started bumping heads with people who were very much more liberal theologically than I am. So that's sort of when I started realizing it, and it it caused me concern of just the reality of it, but it never caused me to be like, well, maybe I shouldn't be Anglican. I
Mm-hmm.
think there was one time when there was some sort of statement that was made in 2018 or 2019 by the bishops in the ACNA that made me consider going to a different jurisdiction at the time. And currently I'm in a different jurisdiction. But that was it was never like leaving Anglicanism. Every now and then I've had a slight desire to go maybe to the Polish National Catholic Church
Mm-hmm.
because I'm of Polish heritage.
Yeah, me
But
too.
nice, nice. Yeah, my last name is Gadomski, so
Yeah.
but I but when I found out that, at least the priest I spoke with in Florida, he said that you actually can't use the Book of Common Prayer if you're going to become part of the PNCC. I was like, okay, then no, it's completely off. Then no,
Right.
I'm not
Right.
using your
Yeah.
Novus Ordo. Basically, it's a Novus Ordo that they're using. I'm like, I'm not using that.
Right. Right. So, uh, you become an Anglican. You start getting into the rhythm of Anglicanism and adopting the theology, the liturgical life. What was the process of becoming an Anglican to then perceiving a call to vocational ministry, ordained ministry?
So I had known since I was a child that I was called to ministry, and I was actually kind of running away from it during my teen years and early 20s. And God caught me, basically, and then had me come back. So during this time when I was looking into Eastern Orthodoxy, one of the reasons I was realizing I couldn't become Eastern Orthodox was, like, it's one thing to be a layman and have issues with sort of what is taught. It's an entirely different thing to be a priest and uh, have issues, significant issues with what is taught, right? So I was looking at this through the lens of, I'm looking into getting ordained, and if I'm called to ordination, and if they confirm that, I'm going to have to teach these things, and I cannot, in good conscience, teach these things. So I went with that into Anglicanism, and I couldn't find anything that I had issue with when it came to what Anglicans taught and what we believed and what we practiced.
All right. So, what was the process like?
So I informed my rector at the time, Father Rakash, wonderful man. He's actually going to be preaching and celebrating at my church in a few weeks because I'll be
Okay.
on vacation.
You know the
Uh,
name. I was wondering why I remembered St. Patrick's, and that name helped me ring the bell because his video series Anglicanism 101 on YouTube that was on their channel was a pretty foundational series for me when I was first kind of catechizing my wife and myself while we were still in the non-denom world. So yeah, from what I
awesome.
could tell, great man. Yeah.
Yeah, I love him. He's awesome. So where were we at? Oh, so I informed him that I was interested in ordination. I believed that I was called, and so they set up a committee and had me go through various stuff, and uh, then it moves on, and once it gets approved there on that level to the uh, diocesan level, and uh, oh, I don't know if I should go into that. No, I won't. Okay. Uh, I got approved into the diocesan level. There was no. I guess I have to say it now because it's going to sound whatever otherwise. There's a man. I'm not going to give his name out, but a man in my diocese at the time who was basically sort of stonewalling against. He was a canon, stonewalling against my ordination precisely because I am theologically conservative, and he's sort of gatekeeping there. And eventually, Father Ray was able to push for that through, and I was able to get ordained. But I went to Trinity School for Ministry, which is now Trinity Anglican Seminary, which I think is a better name.
Yeah.
And I was told that I should go there by my priest, Father Ray, because I'm High Church Anglo Catholic, and I should be able to see a diversity of positions within Anglicanism and sort of know why I believe what I believe in sort of debate, I guess, or if that makes sense, which it does,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, and I loved my time at Trinity, and I do recommend it. Now, there are definitely more liberal strands within Trinity. There are definitely people who are for, quote, women's ordination, things like that. And I did have some discussions, some heavy discussions with people on those sorts of things. But I did not get beaten up once, and I did not have to beat up anybody once. So it went well.
There you go. That's a win
Maybe
right
some
there.
unfriending that happened. That was about it. The worst that happened was unfriending on Facebook.
In today's world, that's pretty peaceable.
Yep, yep.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. So you enter into the ministry and you're ordained a deacon. You're ordained then a priest. You're now what jurisdiction are you in currently?
I'm in the Episcopal Missionary Church, the EMC. We
Okay.
are we have a concord out with the ACNA, but we are opposed to women's quote ordination entirely. And I use the 1928 with some missal additions to for Holy
Best way.
Communion.
It's the best way.
Yep.
It's the
I
best way.
uh,
Yeah.
I will say, for simplicity, whenever we don't have an organist, we just do straight up 28. So
Yeah.
during feast days, we don't usually have an organist, so we just do straight up 28. So the
Yeah.
people know that sort of difference that happens.
Yeah. I think that to me, when I walk into a parish and I want to know, are they Anglican, are they not? If the majority of their liturgy is the 28, such that the prayer books in the pews are still the 28 prayer book with some missal additions, it's a thumbs up. If they've got the actual people's missal instead of the BCP, then I'm like, no,
Yeah,
I'm not too thrilled about that. So,
yeah.
um, yeah, so I would love to I would love to just discuss with you a little bit Anglicanism broadly, and the identity of Anglicanism. I have a video coming out. It actually is probably airing right now as we're recording this interview, kind of discussing Anglican identity a little bit. And one of the points I made, I'll kind of give you a little bit of the outline since it's fresh in my head, and then I want you to just kind of comment on it, dissect it a little bit, and share your own thoughts. But I think sometimes when people are trying to determine what Anglicanism is, they approach it the same way, with the same kind of theological mindset that one would approach Presbyterianism or Lutheranism, where you do have much more written documents that document bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. This is what we believe. And so they come into Anglicanism with a kind of intellectualized way of defining what a particular tradition or faith is. Tell me what you believe. Where's your document that says all the things? And I think when we kind of engage on that basis, that's where we get into the kind of, well, do the 39 articles matter? Are they confessional statement, or are they just a historical document? You kind of have this Anglo-Catholic versus Reformed, and it's arguing about what actual documents and standards are fundamental to Anglican belief. And I think we should form our Anglican identity more in the liturgical patterns of the Anglican way. So if somebody were to say, what does it mean to be an Anglican? I'm not going to first tell them to read the 39 articles. I'm going to say, take a prayer book and start praying the daily office. Find a church and attend Holy Communion on Sundays. And that to me is going to be a greater formation in what it means to be an Anglican, and you'll find out what Anglicans believe through that better than if I were to just say, read the 39 articles or go and look at the creeds in the 7 ecumenical councils. So that's kind of the framing of my video, but I'd love for you to kind of comment on this kind of back and forth, because I do think it is genuinely confusing online for a lot of people, where they see Reformed Anglicans, Evangelical Anglicans, Anglo-Catholics that all seem to have a different definition, and it looks like we have an incoherent tradition when I really don't think that's the case. But I'd love
I
your thoughts.
I agree. I think that the majority of the differences can be chalked up to sort of outside influences on all sides, honestly. I will say this: I'm an Anglo-Catholic. I hold to the 39 articles because I don't believe that they actually contradict the Anglican tradition as understood, like by say Pusey, right?
Right.
There's
Amen.
one there's one caveat, and I think that this is actually an internal inconsistency in what are the Anglican formularies. The Anglican formularies, for those who don't know, are the prayer book, the 39 articles, and the books of homilies, and I would say in that order. So the what is it, the 28th or 29th article, the one about the wicked who do not eat the flesh and blood of Christ. All right, that title I think is actually already problematic because I would say it actually goes against what St. Augustine himself teaches, and they cite St. Augustine in that very article.
Right. Yeah.
But also, it seems to go against what a lot of the liturgy, uh, according to the historical background of it, is teaching about the Eucharist. So, uh, what I sort of do to resolve this is point out that there are two acceptable positions within the Anglican tradition concerning the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist, broadly speaking. There's the more Lutheran understanding, which I would say is the more patristic and sort of consistent understanding of church history. And then there is the more Calvin understanding, which is actually much stronger than what a lot of people at first think, because it's been so watered down by a lot of Presbyterians and Reformed Baptists, uh, mainly as a reaction against Roman Catholicism. um, but that position is also acceptable within the Anglican tradition, the actual Calvin position and the more Lutheran position. So I say I lean more towards the Lutheran position and agree with that, and I'm not going to excommunicate or condemn anyone for holding to the Calvin position. There are people in my parish who hold to the more Calvin position, or at least last time I checked they did. They might have switched since then, because it tends to go more up the candlestick. But I'm not going to say that they're not in our communion, they cannot receive, because they hold to the more Calvin understanding.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I think one of the things that a lot of people who maybe have, because I think Anglicanism does attract a lot of people who have come from various Protestant backgrounds that do emphasize like doctrinal purity. And so when they come to Anglicanism, the fact that we exist with more tensions, where we allow those tensions to exist and don't see them as conflicting with orthodoxy at all, is a bit jarring for people who have come from traditions where I just heard a story from somebody the other day, about somebody separating from them because they were infralapsarian and wanting to cut communion with them, versus superlap. It's like, when you come from something like that where you're ready to divide over every little thing, Anglicanism seems like it just is a free-for-all. But when you actually look at church history, and I would say especially the first like 4 or 5 centuries of the church, you don't see a whole lot different than what you see in Anglicanism today, which is you see a lot of variant views on what it means for Christ to be present in the Eucharist, different articulations of all sorts of doctrines, largely surrounding like the sacraments and stuff. And there's no sense you get from anybody that they're thinking that the person who articulates it a little differently than them is outside of the church or outside orthodoxy. And I do think that Rome and Eastern Orthodoxy have moved further and further into a kind of fundamentalism too, that does not reflect the breadth that the early church allowed to exist within the one holy Catholic Apostolic Church. So how do you think,
I would say,
yeah,
real quick, sorry, I would say that not so much with Rome today. In fact, they're kind of going the other way in many aspects of their.
sure,
I mean, looking at Francis and all, I know he's passed, but that is a legacy that has to be dealt with.
yeah,
But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, I do agree with that. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. No, the question I was just going to ask is, on a pastoral level, how do you help somebody coming into the Anglican tradition? Because I see a lot of guys come into Anglicanism, they kind of park there for a little bit, and then they go usually Eastern Orthodox. It seems like that's the bigger pull right now. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Orthodoxy, much like some of the forms of Protestantism they came from, seems to have an answer for everything. And that kind of provides a level of stability where it's like, hey, we're the one true church. We've got all this stuff figured out. Everybody else doesn't. And it's like, yes, that's attractive, because that appeals to the same kind of thing that I found with the Presbyterian tradition, where the Westminster Confession told me exactly what to believe about every little thing. I would just want to know, how would you pastorally navigate that to show that maybe that approach and way of thinking about things is not actually correct or healthy?
Yeah, so I've not actually had experience of families going Eastern Orthodox. In fact, the only families who have really left at my parish, I've been blessed with in the past. I've only been here about a year and a half, a little over a year and a half or so. I've been blessed with a parish that we started with about 10 people, and this past Sunday, just for Holy Communion, we had 50. The previous Sunday, we had 66, and we had about a dozen or so each time for morning prayer and for adult formation. Uh, it's been wonderful growth. I've had two families leave. Both of them are reverts, which are from Roman Catholicism. They came here because of fiducia supplicans. They were here for a few months, and then they went back to Rome because they, frankly, thought that they were going to hell if they left Rome, kind of thing, which is,
Yeah, sure,
a typical thing,
sure.
unfortunately. So I've I've not had to deal with sort of people coming to Anglicanism and then going to Eastern Orthodoxy in my own parish, and I think there's probably a reason for that. First, we are very faithful to the prayer book tradition, and we make sure that we have things like matins, morning prayer. We do all of the feasts. We're very rigorous, and we typically have the prayer book used. Now, what I have been doing is making handouts that give the page numbers and things like that, as well as the missal
Hmm.
editions. We've been starting that recently, just so people understand what those editions are. But we've had an expectation, a higher expectation of people, and one of the problems I see within a lot of Anglican parishes is that there is this sort of capitulating to everything possible kind of thing, and not
Mm,
actually expecting and demanding things from the parishioners. And I think that's
yeah.
one of the things that is appreciated about Eastern Orthodoxy. I never got a handout when I was visiting the Eastern Orthodox Church that I was visiting, St. Elizabeth's in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. They never gave me a handout. What they did was they just started chanting, and then as I kept going, I kept learning the chanting, and I kept learning how to participate. And
Right.
I appreciated that. There was an expectation that I participated as well, and just like, hey, we're doing this whether you're doing it or not. We're not going to beg and plead and ask you to do it. We are going to expect it. We're not going to like we're expecting people who want to actually participate to participate. We're not going to like kowtow to everything possible. Like, oh, here's a handout, and here we can have somebody here sit with you and explain it all to you and all that sort of stuff. I'm not saying those things are necessarily bad, but I think what we do is we try to coddle too much. Um,
Yeah.
that might sound that might sound maybe rough or something, but if people come, I always tell them, if you have questions, you can ask me. But I want us to keep that prayer book in our hands. I want us to be able to actually um, have an expectation of ourselves, a challenge to ourselves to actually reach up to worship rather than just constantly capitulating and going down.
Yeah. No, I think that's excellent and spot on. Yeah, you go into a lot of Anglican churches and it's just everything is made user friendly to a point where it almost builds off of that seeker sensitive model of the church, which is what a lot of guys are leaving the evangelical churches precisely because of. They don't want that anymore. They want something that is bigger than them, that calls them to be more than what they currently are. And yeah, I just look at my own Anglican formation, and it was a while before I even found out that there was such a thing as the Friday fasts of the church year round. Nobody told me that. It wasn't something that was just, this is what we do as a church because this is what the church has always done. And actually, if you're able to, you must. That's one of the things we do around here. There those things just didn't exist as much. And so yeah, I think you're pointing out something that Anglican churches need to recognize and build on. We need to reclaim a sense of responsibility in the lives of our parishioners, because otherwise, I think this is actually to contrast some of the stability that you see in Orthodoxy versus the instability in Rome. It's because Orthodoxy expects things of the laity and Rome doesn't. The laity can
Yes.
get away with showing up and sneaking out the side door as the dismissal's being said. Um, and nobody knows who they are. The priest maybe isn't even on a name-to-name basis with them. And when that kind of culture is allowed to exist and to grow, what you end up with is the kind of rampant nominalism that I think you see, especially in the Novus Ordo parishes within Roman Catholicism. So I think you're spot on. Kind of turning for. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Really, just one example that people tend to not think of. The exhortation is found. There are multiple ones. There are three in the 28 prayer book. The exhortations are found on pages 85 to 88 or 89, something like that. 89. That's something that we do in our liturgy. So I did the first exhortation for Trinity Sunday, and then I do the second exhortation for every Sunday. And I'm actually going to start now adding this to even the major feast days, and every time that we have Holy Communion, I'm going to give that exhortation because that is part of our prayer book tradition, and I want us to have that. And they understand why we do it, precisely because we're saying, hey, we're about to receive Holy Communion this next time we gather together. So make sure your heart is right. Make sure that you have repented of any sins, that you've gone and asked for forgiveness from those you've wronged, etc. So I think it's a great and noble practice to have, and we've done away with that for whatever reasons.
Right. Yeah. No. That is beautiful, and I'm grateful to be um, serving at an established parish in the REC that does include the exhortation as well. So that's a wonderful thing. I would love to just touch on this because YouTube's already flooded with a lot of Roman Catholicism apologetics, and Eastern Orthodoxy feels like it's taken over everything online. If there are people watching this, or people who come to your channel or my channel and are interested in Anglicanism but are also considering Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, what are some of the main conversation points or things that you would tell them that you believe makes Anglicanism the better choice?
So first and foremost, I think that we objectively have the best worship, without question. I'll fight people to the death over that. I say this as somebody who loved the Eastern Orthodox liturgy. The liturgy of St. John Chrysostom was beautiful to me, but I think that objectively, the 1928 prayer book, especially with the American missal editions and all that, is beautiful. It's unparalleled. Actually, honestly, yeah, the 1662 is beautiful also. I would love to actually revive the 1549 and see what we can do with that. I actually have a friend, Dr. Stephen Boyce, who's looking at that, and I definitely he's asked me to help out with that. I haven't been able to do anything yet, but
Very cool.
Yeah, like I think the prayer book tradition is the best when it comes to worship. I believe that we are sufficiently, how do I put this? Sufficiently tight in our theology to reject heresies, but I believe that we also have a proper understanding of what is actually heresy and what is not heresy, and it's just difference of opinion or adiaphora and all that sort of stuff. So, um, I think that the Roman Catholics are obviously way too tight on that, and the Eastern Orthodox are in some points way too tight on that, and other points they kind of allow for anything. um, toll booths, that's okay. Universalism, it's okay. But like how you cross yourself, oh, we're gonna excommunicate you over that,
Yeah, right, right.
and we're
Yeah,
gonna kill you too.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, so essentially, Anglicanism, best worship, which I'll defend right there with you, and also allows for and recognizes both what heresy is, but also what it isn't, better than any other tradition. Those would be the two main points.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Well, I Is there any aspects of your story that you left out that you'd like to share?
Let me think. I mean, I don't know if this is how relevant this is, but like, yeah, my brother, a few years after I became Anglican, became Roman Catholic. So he and I
Okay,
have
that's
these discussions.
hilarious because my brother became Roman Catholic a few years after I became an Anglican too. So that's really funny. Yeah, younger brother.
So, uh, um, he and I have these discussions all the time. He's had a bit of a wild ride within Roman Catholicism. I don't want to go into details just for his sake. Not
Yeah,
bad. Don't nothing like horrible, but just dealing with Francis, dealing with COVID. You've got to sometimes go wiggling
yeah,
around
yeah.
with the Roman Catholic sort of sect. And so he's right now in the Ruthenian rite, which he's done a lot of research and has been like, well, actually, you know what? We might not be Polish technically. We're actually technically Ruthenian. And so he's become Ruthenian through his research and all that. And he goes to a little parish in Florida that is Ruthenian rite. And I've been to it multiple times. I usually go worship with him if I'm down there and it happens to be Sunday and all. So yeah, he and I used to never out of anger, but like debate all the time. And then when the whole Pachamama thing happened, I was like, John, there's no defending that. And he was like, yeah. So for a few years, he kind of laid off on it, and then started getting back into it again. And then Fiducia Supplicans happened. I'm like, John, Fiducia Supplicans, really? Seriously, you're gonna tell me?
That's
He's like,
funny.
okay. Um,
Yeah,
and so now he's like, okay, yeah, I know. We have good times
that's
with that.
great.
That's the only thing I can really think
Yeah.
of. I guess you could say maybe I've gone through a sort of range of like Anglo Catholic and an almost Newman type to
Hmm.
a sort of like high church reformed Anglican at some points, and then I basically Pusey is my saint, I guess you could
Yeah.
say.
Sure.
So I love
Well,
Pusey.
yeah. Break that down just a little bit if you don't mind, because yeah, as people are navigating Anglicanism, there's obviously different places you can kind of end up, all within the umbrella. Um, what compelled you towards more of the Newman Anglo Catholicism at one point, and then kind of pulled you back more towards Reform, and how did you then kind of end up with Pusey as your guy?
Yeah, so I guess just because just the circles I was running in at the time for each one kind of pulled me one way or the other. Uh, at least for the first two. So when I went to St. Patrick's, there was a lot of very Anglo Catholic practices and such. And I don't say this in a sort of detrimental way to them, uh, but like followed that. So like heavily involved in prayers to the saints, rosary, etc., all that sort of stuff. Proponent of purgatory and things like that. Not that the church itself would like confess or profess those things, but like a lot of people in those circles would. So I just sort of went along with it, and then um, I went to seminary and started like going back away from that. Uh, in part when I was in the REC too, that sort of pushed me back. But I will say throughout this whole time, I felt like actually kind of Pusey was that anchor because I was like whatever, like everything I read of Pusey I loved. He is again one of my favorite theologians and saints. I think he's a wonderful man. Uh, and so I think it was just sort of me sort of rocking the boat a little bit in my own theological journey and finding where, getting influence from one person or getting influence by another, and then just sort of finding my own footing and being like, well, where am I? And I I recognized one of the problems with the sort of Anglo Catholic tradition was that there was a rejection of the 39 Articles, and it was almost like the Reformation was entirely a mistake, you know.
Right, right.
And then I saw on the other side with the Reformed, the issue I had was like everything they did was perfect and inspired and infallible, except for the parts that are Anglo Catholic, and I don't like those parts. I'm going to pretend those don't exist.
Right, right. Yeah.
So, like when Bishop Jeremy Taylor talks about reverencing the altar. Oh no, that's not when
Yeah, can't do
the rubrics or the what's it called? What's the term for it? The vestments rubrics. Uh,
that.
the chasuble and all that sort of stuff during Queen Elizabeth is supposed to be the official sort of vestments and all that. Oh no, we ignore that. The sign of the cross. You know the groups I'm talking about. I don't know if I should
Oh
name
yeah,
them or not. Should I
yeah.
name
I
them?
mean, go for it. Go for it.
Okay. Like Anglicanism as established, right? Arguments against the stole, the evil stole. Yeah, arguments against literally the sign of the cross, when literally our
Right.
prayer book talks about the sign of the cross, and they like tried to argue why it still is wrong, even though the prayer book talks about the. I'm like, you can't call yourself prayer book
Yep.
Anglican if you're going to be against
If you're
the sign
not.
of the cross. And
Right.
like ad orientem is evil and all that sort of stuff. So I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that the when I actually went into the Reformation itself, and especially like the post Reformation, I was realizing, oh yeah, there are some issues that go back and like there are definitely parties and stuff going back and forth, but there's a strong line of Catholicity here too. So I learned not to hate the Reformation and appreciated the Reformation and even appreciated the 39 Articles. Again, you look at the 39 Articles, they're very careful. And apart from literally that one title, not even the article itself, but the title of it,
Yeah.
because I agree with the article, what it says, as how I
Right.
understand, and I think the church understands St. Augustine. I just disagree with the title, So like everything
Right.
else is I think thoroughly orthodox, like perfectly
Yeah.
fine. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree with all of that. It's interesting. I think you and I are similar in where we've ended up theologically, because I would call myself Anglo-Catholic, but I vacillated from one side to kind of the other, and yeah, I
yeah,
really love Pusey. He's I think a great theologian to kind of point if somebody goes, hey, who in your long list of great theologians and divines would you say is like a great definition of what Anglicanism should be? I'd point them to Pusey for sure. um yeah. I was going to ask you one more question. What was
yeah,
it?
sure.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say. Speaking of theologians, I'd just be curious to know from your time as a independent fundamentalist Baptist all the way to the present, who were like some theologians that you kind of cycled through that you were like, these guys are the bomb, and then we're all the way to where you are today.
Should I start at the beginning?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, I grew up on a Becca. I don't know if anyone in your audience knows what a Becca is. I don't know if you do. Do you know a Becca?
I do not. No.
Oh, okay. A Becca is sort of the, not sort of, it is the fundamentalist Baptist curriculum for schools, for
Oh,
Christian
yes,
schools.
yes, yes. Okay, curriculum. Yeah. Yeah, no, I
Yeah,
have
and
heard of it.
it certainly has some of the worst history possible in its in its stuff. Oh my goodness, it's so bad when it comes to the history. In fact, I when I was teaching in California, we were using a Becca for whatever reason, and I actually was teaching the fifth graders, and I told them when we got to Constantine, I said, "Okay, what we're about to read in Constantine is not true. Constantine did not make Christianity the state religion. Constantine was not an evil, bad man who was, destroying and persecuting the real Christians or anything like that. No, he's a flawed man, don't get me wrong, but he gave freedom and liberty to the Christians, and he became a Christian himself, like, is what I point out. And yes, there are controversies about that, of course. He was baptized by a semi-Arian, all that, yeah, but like, I didn't go into the crazy details. I said it was a lot more nuanced, and what the Abeka book said was just simply not true. But anyway, even in that one, when I was reading it in fifth grade, myself as a fifth grader, I came across Saint Ignatius of Antioch. They talked about him, and I was amazed that we had writings about or by a Christian in the early second century, and he died in AD 107. And here I was
Yeah.
thinking, as a little fifth grader, I'm like, oh, I never realized, like, oh, wait a minute, there are other Christians between now and the writing of Scripture. So that was like the first sort of light bulb that went off in my head. And C.S. Lewis, to this day, is my favorite uh, uh, Christian writer outside of Scripture. I guess I would say. Pusey
Yeah,
is a close one up there. Saint Athanasius is up there as well. I mean, like they're so foundational, men like Saint Athanasius and such. It feels almost sacrilegious to say that like C.S. Lewis is better, but he had much more of an
sure.
impact on me, I would say,
Yeah,
personally.
yeah,
So that's why I have a lot of love for him and his writings. So C.S. Lewis to this day, love, yeah. Tolkien, I love as well. I know he's not a theologian or anything, and technically, like Lewis isn't really either, but
right,
they
right.
definitely had a great impact upon
Oh yeah,
my faith. N.T. Wright was a great impact on my faith in a positive way during college when I was looking into all these questions. And I guess I should go before him with James White. He actually I'm okay. I'm going backwards now. Before then, in my teen years, I loved John Wesley, and that didn't really know he was Anglican. I just knew him as, well, he's Methodist because he quote started the Methodist Church and all that, right?
right, right.
He died an Anglican, and
Yeah,
he to his dying breath maintained his being an Anglican. So he really influenced me in a good way. And then James White helped me when I was going through the questions of like King James onlyism, which, funny enough, I disagree with him on the textual debates today, but he got me out of a very Ruckmanite understanding of King James of the King James Bible, which those of you who don't know who Ruckman is, Ruckman taught, he's passed away a few years ago. Ruckman taught that the King James as a translation is inspired, and we literally use the King James to correct the Greek, not the Greek to correct any translation, or
right.
specifically the King James. So very, very extreme view. So like James White pulled me out of that through me reading his stuff, the King James only controversy, watching debates, etc. And then N.T. Wright was really helpful in my sort of ecclesiology and sacramental theology and liturgy and such. He's obviously fallen by the wayside. I just did a video recently on
Yeah.
him. James K.A. Smith was very helpful as well in when it
Okay.
came to liturgy specifically and especially. And of course, he's fallen by the wayside too. Uh, you know, uh, which is unfortunate. William Lane Craig
Yeah.
was really big, and I won't say he's quote fallen by the wayside in the sense of like, he's still opposed to sodomy and all that stuff, but
Right.
he is his Christology and his doctrine of God
Yeah.
are
That's
just
bad.
abysmal,
Bad news.
really really bad, and I feel, yeah. Uh, who else? Um, and then Pusey I discovered around there sometime, and I really started realizing that, like, I keep seeing these theologians who are alive today, and they keep really really messing up very very fundamental core doctrines of Christianity. But I don't see that with like these people in like, at least certain people in the 1800s, and like the further back you get the better they are. you know so I
Right.
just started being
Right.
like, you know what, I'm just going to start reading the older people, so Pusey, and I was already doing this, but like Saint Athanasius, Saint Augustine, Saint John Chrysostom, Saint Ignatius, Saint Irenaeus, all these men, and I was like, oh, these guys are really solid.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Yeah. It's interesting. I like to ask that question sometimes too because I think a lot of people feel as though when they move from one tradition to the next, they should be divorcing themselves entirely from the tradition that they came from. But I think when we reflect on the theologians that have influenced us over the years, we can see that each of them actually are kind of all interconnected and leading us deeper into the truth of Christ. And so I think it's good and helpful to see how the grace of God is at work constantly in the
Yeah,
lives of His people. Yeah, well, I won't keep you any longer here, but if I'll just ask if there's any place you want to any plugs you want to make, anything you want to say to the audience on where they can find you.
I guess just check out my channel, Barely Protestant. I'm on X. I really would much rather people. I mean, check out my channel if you're interested in Anglicanism and all that sort of stuff. But I really want people to, if you're not Anglican, check out a local Anglican church, especially in like the Continuum or an REC parish or a good solid ACNA parish. See what you can do to join there and learn more about Anglicanism. Um, if you don't, this is something I've been pushing for a bit. If you don't have a local faithful Anglican parish near you, contact me. My email is barelyprotestant@gmail.com, and I will do what I can to sort of help you establish an Anglican mission in your area if you are interested in that. I'm in talks with like two different people right now for that exactly, and I think that that's one way that we can grow. So please,
Yes.
if
Yes.
you want an Anglican parish near you, contact me and or the closest faithful Anglican church that you can find, and see what can be done to sort of help establish a good solid parish there or a mission there.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent advice. Well, Father James, thank you very much for coming on, chatting with me. I enjoyed it, and blessings on your ministry and your parish.
Thank you. Blessings on yours as well.